President Trump not sounding super optimistic about his meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin this week, what he had to say about possibly walking away from talks. Plus, crime crackdown. Police in Washington, D.C. are now under federal control. What does it mean, and are other cities next? And a federal judge lashes out at the Department of Justice over their request to unseal grand jury testimony in Ghislaine Maxwell's sexual abuse case. Those stories and more today, Tuesday, August 12th. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. For a president whose foreign policy seems to have been anchored by his aspiration to end wars, President Trump is keeping his feelings about Friday's Alaskan summit with Vladimir Putin pretty realistic. As far as the president is concerned, there's one goal: telling Putin to, quote, end this war. And it seems two's company and three's a crowd with this international get-together. Trump confirmed that President Vladimir Zelensky isn't getting an invite. However, he assured reporters that the Ukrainian leader would be there in the next meeting.
The next meeting will be with Zelensky and Putin, or Zelensky and Putin and me. I'll be there if they need, but I want to have a meeting set up between the two leaders.
The president also said his aim would be to get some territory back for Ukraine, but noted that there will have to be some, quote, swapping in order to get a peace deal done. But that may be a non-starter for Zelensky, who said in the past that he wouldn't part with any land from his sovereign nation. The president claimed he'll know within 2 minutes whether this summit will succeed, and admitted this.
Now, I may leave and say, good luck, and that'll be the end. I may say this is not going to be settled.
Now to the continuing, or should I say never-ending, fight over the Epstein files. A Manhattan federal judge is blocking the Trump administration's attempt to unseal grand jury documents in the Jeffrey Epstein case, or more specifically, in the case against his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, grand jury proceedings are conducted in private, and testimony typically remains sealed. But the administration, Attorney General Pam Bondi to be precise, asked that these particular documents be made public, saying it could provide, quote, significant information. Remember, Pam Bondi was the one who first said there was something there with the Epstein files, and then backed a memo from the feds that there was nothing there. And now this. That joint memo by the DOJ and FBI prompted an uproar from some of the conspiracy-minded on both sides of the political aisle. Well, it seems the Obama-appointed judge in this instance agreed with the initial assessment, at least when it comes to the sealed testimony. In a scathing decision, he wrote in part, quote, the court's review confirmed that unsealing the grand jury materials would not reveal new information of any consequence, and one might conclude that the government's motion for their unsealing was aimed not at transparency, but at diversion, aimed not at full disclosure, but at the illusion of such. So cue the conspiracy theorists. Now, let's go back to school. Pencils, notebooks, backpacks, maybe a protractor, even though no one actually knows what to do with a protractor. These are the things that you would expect to see on a back-to-school shopping list. But modern parenting is not quite so simple. Concerned moms and dads of incoming college freshmen are sending their kids to school packed with Narcan, condoms, and Plan B. Now, that list might have you clutching your pearls, but sex and drugs are things teens are going to be faced with on college campuses. The Post spoke to some of the students who've been sent with an R-rated first aid kit, and they said they prefer their parents' straightforward approach to keeping them safe. One co-ed told us she administered Narcan, an opioid antagonist that reverses the effects of things like fentanyl and heroin, to a girl who was passed out on the front lawn of an off-campus frat party. An ideal situation? Absolutely not, but also not the tragedy it could have been. Boise State freshman Sophia Green and her mom Jamie went viral on TikTok when they shared their college survival kit. It included Narcan and Plan B. More than 5.5 million people saw that clip. Now, these parents are getting dragged by some online, but one adolescent psychologist the Post spoke to said the criticisms are just off base, telling us, quote, the message is, I don't want you to get into any kind of tricky predicaments, but here are some tools that you can use to make smart choices after the fact. In short, these aren't green lights to behave badly, more expect the best, prepare for the worst. Now to our big story. Washington, D.C. is now under federal control, or at least the National Guard and police are. It's honestly pretty complicated. Here's President Trump announcing the move yesterday.
Our capital city has been overtaken by violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals, roving mobs of wild youth, drugged out maniacs and homeless people, and we're not going to let it happen anymore. We're not going to take it.
The president is using a 1973 law to bring the D.C. Metro Police under the control of the Department of Justice for the next 30 days, promising that his plan to clean up D.C. will happen, as he puts it, real quick. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser spoke after Trump's announcement, and while she didn't sound especially thrilled at giving over control of law enforcement to the feds, she admitted it was the law and that she would comply with it. Now, D.C. might not even be a novel case here. The president suggested that he will be looking at New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles as places he could order the feds to next. That could prove tricky, since the Trump administration is already in a legal battle with California over doing just that. The Post's chief Washington correspondent Stephen Nelson was there for the announcement, and he joins me now. You are clearly in the throes of things. You're sitting in front of the White House right now. What's it like on the ground in D.C. with the National Guard out there?
Sure. So there are a few components to what's happening right now. President Trump on Thursday ordered some federal law enforcement agencies to beef up their presence in D.C. So we've been seeing FBI, DEA, DHS officials patrolling the streets, not in huge numbers. You don't see them out in the residential neighborhoods so much, but they're on some of the busy streets. President Trump announced, though, that he was taking federal control of the D.C. Police Department, which has 3,400 officers. It's a huge police force. So the D.C. police right now are working with the Justice Department to decide how this transition is going to be working and what they're going to be doing differently. And then we have additionally the National Guard being deployed. That is the most mysterious element right now. The National Guard typically is on the streets of D.C. for large events, such as inaugurations or, if we have particularly bad rioting. But we're not sure exactly what they're going to be doing in this instance or how many of them there will be.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to sort of my next question. As you said, you've seen the National Guard out plenty of times in D.C. I have seen them out in Los Angeles, in New York, when there are big issues like hurricanes. You see them out there. But what their role is going to be in a different capacity seems really confusing. Am I wrong here? Or is it confusing for you too?
Well, it is in the sense that it hasn't been clarified. Typically, National Guard members do not make arrests. They assist the local law enforcement. There isn't like the type of mass rioting or social upheaval that we've seen them in the past. I was here for the George Floyd protest riots, and one night I was with one of the marches, and a National Guard helicopter hovered over top of us, and apparently that's a crowd control tactic some places, and it is surprisingly effective. It blows the dust into everyone's eyes. So they were directly engaged with the people then, but typically you just see them on a street corner in front of a federal building, and then that's about it. So we don't know exactly what their role is going to be in all of this.
Now, I also want to ask you about the homeless, quote unquote, slums that the president has been referring to. Did he say specifically what he's going to do with these people? He seemed very clear that the plan would be to get them out of D.C. and send them as far away as possible. But then what that actually looks like in practice seemed unclear.
Well, there are potentially two separate issues here. The homeless people who live in tents and the slums, as you said, that we're supposedly getting rid of. This D.C. has very high property values. And if he's referring to, permanent residential dwellings as slums, he must mean public housing. There are some concentrations of it, roughly a mile from the White House, 2 miles. Those areas tend to have higher crime. But I don't know how actually you would go about getting rid of those apartment buildings. He didn't outline in much detail this idea. Regarding homeless encampments, that's a much easier matter to address. And the city and the National Park Service have had kind of a whack-a-mole for many years. There was a McPherson Square near the White House throughout the pandemic. There was a giant encampment, and then it got cleared. President Trump posted on social media a few days ago images of tents along the route to the west of the White House, which is, just happens to be the route that he takes to and from his Northern Virginia golf course. So that tent city has been there for quite a while. I'm a little bit surprised that it hasn't been cleared up already. But, the tent city, as you can see, a path forward much easier than you can what he referred to as slums.
Yeah, those temporary structures are a lot easier to clear out than people who are living inside of actual dwellings. Stephen Nelson from the ground watching this all unfold in front of the White House. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now from our friends at Page Six. Travis and Jason Kelce have one of the most popular podcasts in the country, if you don't count this one, of course. It's called New Heights. I'm sure you've heard it or at least heard of it. Now, the brothers teased that Wednesday's episode will feature a very special guest. You might say there is a blank space here. And of course, everybody flipped out thinking it's going to be Taylor Swift. As with all things Taylor Swift, Swifties mobilize like they're solving the Da Vinci Code. Here are some of the reasons that fans think the superstar is making her New Heights debut this week. For obvious starters, her beloved boyfriend is Travis Kelce, so it shouldn't be too hard to pin her down for this. Second, the episode drops on Wednesday, August 13th. 13 is well known to be Taylor's favorite number, and it factors into all sorts of Swift-related premieres, album drops, etc. You get the idea. Thirdly, Jason Kelce is wearing a t-shirt with Swift on it in the Instagram teaser. But if you are still not convinced, normally the background of the Instagram posts teasing guests is yellow. This week it's orange, and that matches one of the best-known outfits from Swift's mega successful Eras tour. And finally, there's a silhouette of the very special guest on that Instagram post, and it absolutely looks like Taylor. So kind of case closed here. I will, of course, keep an eye and ear out for it, and we'll be sure to fill you in on anything juicy we learn from the episode if it is indeed Taylor Swift. If the guest isn't Taylor Swift at this point, woof, because I feel sorry for them. People are gonna be pissed. There'll be some bad blood, if you know what I mean. And finally today, it's the end of an era for AOL. You probably thought that era ended in like 2007, but yes, that company still exists. The fine folks at America Online, that's what AOL stands for if you forgot, are ending dial-up service. Yes, that still exists. Dial-up service allows customers to access the internet through good old landline telephones. Yeah, they still exist. The U.S. Census Bureau says that as of 2023, about 163,000 American households still rely on dial-up as their only way to access the internet. But AOL, once the largest internet company in the world, says it evaluates all of its products from time to time, and its dial-up is used infrequently enough to shutter it as of September 30th. So goodbye, old friend. Yeah, that brings me back. Ooh, my ears hurt. Full disclosure, my AIM screen name was Katie Baby, with 2 E's in Katie for some inexplicable reason. 'Twas a simpler time and not one I care to go back to. The internet was slow as hell. You couldn't use the phone the same time you were online, and there were no podcasts. No podcasts that you should be liking and subscribing to, like the New York Postcast. Fun fact, NewYorkPost.com was actually around back then. It launched in the mid-90s, and our print edition was started by Alexander Hamilton in 1801. So they have been around the block. Go check out what other stories we are working on today in print or online. We're going to play that sound for you one more time.